HOA Karen calls 911, but didn't he know my wife was the one who took the call? Watch what happened next. It all started with a routine day in our quiet neighborhood, where everyone minds their own business and lives in peace. Little did we know that this day would soon become a chaotic mess, thanks to one particularly bold HOA Karen. This woman, whom we had all encountered at neighborhood meetings before, was infamous for her obsessive enforcement of HOA rules. She had made it her mission to make everyone follow the smallest details of the neighborhood guidelines, regardless of whether they were necessary or even reasonable. It began when she showed up at our house, knocking furiously on the door. I had just come back from running errands, and my wife was inside, preparing dinner. Karen was standing on the porch, holding a clipboard and pointing out that we were in violation of some obscure HOA rule she had come across in the community newsletter. She insisted that the trash bins weren't placed in the proper position, something that was hardly noticeable and, frankly, not even worth mentioning. But for her, it was a big deal, and she wasn't going to let it slide. I tried to keep things calm and explain that we were in the middle of a busy day, but she wasn't having any of it. The more I tried to reason with her, the more agitated she became. Her voice grew louder, and soon she was threatening to call the HOA board to report us for not following the rules. I tried to calmly remind her that these kinds of minor infractions weren't worth making a fuss over. But Karen wasn't listening. Instead, she stormed off the porch, muttering under her breath that we would regret not following the rules. What I didn't realize at the time was that this would be far from over. Later that evening, she took things a step further, something I could never have predicted. Karen, determined to enforce her idea of order, decided to call 911 to force her way into our house and escalate the situation. She didn't know that my wife, who was home alone at the time, had picked up the call. That's when things took a completely unexpected turn. This HOA drama was about to go from irritating to dangerous. As Karen stood on our porch, her frustration visible in every movement, she made it clear that she wasn't going to back down. Her persistence grew stronger with every word she spoke. It was as if she was determined to ensure we followed every last detail of the HOA's guidelines, even if it meant causing trouble for us. When I told her that I would take care of the trash bins and make sure they were in the right spot, I thought that would be the end of it. But she wasn't satisfied. She stood there, almost daring me to do something about it, watching every move I made. When I turned to head inside, she suddenly reached out and grabbed my arm. The shock of it caught me off guard. But what was even more unsettling was the intensity with which she tried to assert her control. She demanded that I give her access to the property so she could check everything herself. Yes. She wanted to inspect our yard and the house to ensure we were adhering to every single HOA rule. At that point, I knew this wasn't just about trash bins anymore. It was about her need to feel powerful and in control. I told her that she wasn't welcome inside and that we would handle the matter ourselves. But that wasn't enough for her. She stood there, still glaring at me, almost like she expected me to apologize for existing in the neighborhood. Her anger was palpable as she started yelling, making it clear that she would report us, not just for the trash bins but for anything she could find. That's when I realized that this was no longer a friendly HOA complaint. This was personal for her. She wasn't going to let it go. And in her mind, she had all the power. The fact that she had now completely ignored my wishes and was demanding more from me only fueled her need for control. But the real shock came when she turned around to leave. As I thought the confrontation had ended, I heard her muttering something under her breath about calling the authorities. It seemed so out of place. But it was only the beginning of her over-the-top actions. What started as a simple disagreement about trash bins had now escalated into something far more serious. Little did I know, this would spiral into an unexpected nightmare. When Karen stormed off the porch, I thought the worst was over. But little did I know that the real chaos was about to begin. Later that evening, as my wife was finishing up some household chores, she was alone in the house when the phone rang. To her surprise, the caller ID displayed a local 911 emergency line. At first, she thought it was a wrong number or a misdial. But when she picked up, She immediately realized that this was not the case. It was Karen. Karen, in her usual dramatic fashion, had decided to escalate the situation to an unimaginable level. She told my wife that we were in violation of the rules. And this time, she had called the police, demanding they show up at our door to enforce her idea of order. She was furious, insisting that my wife immediately let the officers inside, claiming it was a matter of urgency. What Karen didn't know, however, was that my wife had already been made aware of the situation and was prepared to handle it calmly and professionally. Instead of panicking or reacting with fear, my wife took control of the situation. She calmly asked Karen why she had called 911 over something so trivial. Karen, thinking she had an ally on the phone, began explaining her so-called emergency. My wife, knowing that this wasn't an emergency, could only feel a mix of disbelief and frustration. She kept her voice steady, assuring Karen that we would handle it ourselves and that there was no need for the authorities to get involved. But Karen wasn't listening. She kept insisting that this was a legal matter and that we were breaking the rules. When my wife realized that Karen wasn't going to back down, she calmly ended the call. She didn't get agitated, didn't allow herself to be drawn into a heated argument. Instead, she took a step back, knowing that the real battle would come when the police arrived. Little did Karen know, by calling 911, she had not only triggered a response from the authorities but also set in motion her own downfall. This was no longer about trash bins or HOA rules. It had escalated into something far bigger. My wife, fully aware of what was at stake, prepared herself for what was coming next. The situation was far from over, and Karen would soon regret her decision to push things so far. The moment the police arrived, the situation took a drastic turn. Karen, oblivious to the consequences of her actions, was still standing outside, certain that she had done the right thing by calling 911. She seemed to think that the police would back her up, that they would show up, hear her side of the story, and enforce the rules she had been so adamant about. But when the officers got out of their patrol cars and saw the scene, the tone of the situation immediately shifted. My wife, calm but firm, greeted the officers and explained the situation. She clarified that there was no emergency, no real violation, and no need for police involvement. At first, the officers seemed confused by the call, asking Karen why she had felt the need to bring them into a civil matter. Karen, undeterred, went into her usual rant about the HOA rules, listing off regulations that were so trivial. They seemed almost laughable. She insisted that we had been ignoring the rules and that we needed to be held accountable. The officers, however, were less than impressed. They politely listened to her. But as soon as Karen started to demand they enter our home and inspect the property, their patience wore thin. They quickly realized that she was overstepping her bounds and making a mountain out of a molehill. One of the officers stepped forward and asked her to step aside for a moment while they assessed the situation. That's when the real shock came. As the officers started talking to Karen privately, they informed her that by calling 911 for a non-emergency situation and trying to involve the police in something so trivial, she was in fact misusing the system. Karen's reaction was immediate and dramatic. She became defensive and angry, refusing to accept that she was in the wrong. Her face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and rage as she tried to justify her actions. But the officers were having none of it. They explained that this was not only unnecessary, but that her actions were creating a disturbance. She was informed that she was now at risk of being charged for making a false report and wasting police resources. The realization hit Karen like a ton of bricks. What she thought was a righteous call for help had turned into her own undoing. The officers made it clear that if she didn't calm down and leave, she would be arrested for her behavior. And just like that, the tables had turned. The Karen who thought she could dictate the situation was now the one facing consequences. The police placed her under arrest, and as they handcuffed her, she finally understood the gravity of her actions. It was a complete backfire, and she had no one to blame but herself. After Karen was escorted away by the police, the aftermath of the incident began to sink in. It was hard to believe that something so trivial had escalated to this level of chaos. What started as a simple HOA complaint about trash bins had transformed into a full-blown confrontation. And Karen had pushed it too far. For my wife and me, the situation was a blend of disbelief, relief, and frustration. We couldn't believe that someone would go to such lengths over something so small. But at the same time, we felt a sense of justice knowing that the authorities had handled the situation appropriately. In the days following the incident, we found ourselves reflecting on the entire ordeal. Karen's actions not only caused unnecessary stress, but also showed how far some people would go to feel in control. We realized that her obsession with enforcing HOA rules had little to do with actually maintaining the community and everything to do with asserting her power over others. Her complete disregard for personal boundaries and her willingness to manipulate the system to get her way had backfired spectacularly. For us, this experience served as a powerful reminder of how important it is to stand up for ourselves and not let others impose their will unjustly. My wife's calm and composed handling of the situation had been crucial. She didn't let Karen's aggression provoke her into making rash decisions, and she took control when it mattered most. Her ability to remain level-headed in such a tense situation was something we both took pride in. The legal repercussions for Karen were still unfolding, and we had to stay updated on any further developments. But we knew that the real consequence for her was the loss of her credibility. The community, which had already viewed her with skepticism due to her overbearing behavior, would now see her in a completely different light. Word spread quickly about her actions, and people who had once been afraid of her or avoided confrontation began to see her for what she truly was: someone who used manipulation and control to achieve her goals. For us, this was a lesson in not tolerating toxic behavior. It wasn't just about trash bins anymore. It was about standing up against someone who thought they could walk all over us. While Karen's arrest was a dramatic end to a ridiculous situation, it was a victory for personal boundaries and the right to live peacefully without interference from others. We knew that if we ever faced a similar situation again, we would be more prepared to handle it. If you enjoyed this shocking story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a wild HOA drama or shocking reveal. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.